Well, we are going towards the closing of today's afternoon. I have a few things to say, but before I do that, I'd like to give the word to Marc Jacobs to wrap today's session up. I hope he is going, well, Marc Jacobs, he is a professor of Cultural Heritage at the Free University of Brussels, and he is director at FARO in Belgium. I hope he will well, give his impressions of what has been said today and its worth for the future developments. Marc, I don't think this works.
Yes.
So I'll try this one.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll try to keep it short. I learned a lot of things today. I will end with a number of recommendations how to use the 2003 convention. That's why I brought the blue Bible. You can recognize specialists. They always have this with them at arm's length. So I will come back to that later. One of the things I remember when listening to the story about the City Museum Aarhau, with the title 10 Arrivals, that was a statement. First we had the title and then the reality kicked in, so we had 11 stories. And this is something which I really like. Can it be a little bit more? Mag het iets meer zijn in Dutch? It's my official slogan, and I think that's probably what we witnessed today. We started with Marilena Alivizatou, who explained the 2003 UNESCO Convention to us and gave a number of pointers to what is happening in the museum. You remember those keywords: embodied, dynamic, community. I will come back to that later. And the notion of heritage in danger. Does it need safeguarding intangible cultural heritage or not? And is there a kind of threat? I think she explained very well the difference between the salvage paradigm, trying to save something, and the empowerment. And we just did a SWOT analysis instead of a SWOT analysis. The T was missing, the threats. And I think that's something to think about. Okay. A SWOT and strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, but we did not discuss the threats that normally you should do. Why did we do that? Okay. So in the talk Marilena gave, she gave the example of what is happening in Greece today, and she's actually also suggested that super diversity can be conceived of as a threat, and that people try to react. And that intangible cultural heritage can be seen as kind of pure. And in the whole day we heard about super the whole day, and I'm a big fan of Superman. And actually what is said there, that intangible cultural heritage can also be used as kryptonite. I don't know if you know the story that Superman came from the planet of Krypton. He has many powers, but he cannot stand this kind of pure rocks that come from the planet. So ICH can be kryptonite, or you can use it in different ways. Fatima Ulat Tam, who discussed the henna example, she said that, well, super diversity for her can be key to the future in henna culture in a super diverse society, precisely by tapping in and combining with the diversity of people living here. So it can be very empowering. So it is kind of empowered that, like Superman has if he comes on Earth, so he brought something from another planet and he can use his forces. And, but he cannot be confronted with so-called pure elements from the original place he came from. Something to think about. Okay. And another element which I think is interesting, especially if we try to combine it with the 2003 convention, is the relation between viability in Article 16 of the Convention, visibility, that is, so viability, visibility, which is also in Article 16 of the 2003 Convention, and visitability. Places where culture is on display, that's what museums do, and that's also what a convention text can do. And to think about the relation between all those elements might be interesting. Okay, then we had a very interesting talk by Dirk Geltoff, who explained to us what super diversity can mean. I just came last week back from Korea, where we also had a discussion about diversity. And what occurred to me is that this discussion that we are having, it looks totally different if you're living in a country like China or Korea, where if you go to the cities, where the dominant majority is the Han population, for instance, in China. Sorry, I will try it with this. And in Korea, where the majority is still Korean. So I think if we formulate our conclusion that we really have to consider this European context, and if we make recommendations about how to use it in the 2003 convention, that we should think about that. Yeah. Okay. One of the interesting lessons I learned from the talk by Dirk Gelthoff is that you see the power of this age cohort. In statistics, you see this moving up, and this is conceived as quite a challenge. And I spontaneously thought there's one item inscribed on the representative list of UNESCO. It's the age cohort rituals at the city of Leuven, where they actually have a ritual of everyone turning 40 in a specific place. They organize a feast and a network, and they follow that group through time. And I think this idea of organizing something with age cohorts might be an ICH solution to deal with that. Another element that I picked up in the slides by Dirk Gelthoff are the so-called undocumented migrants. That's a very interesting idea if you're working in the archive sector, that you see this group, this cohort coming, turning from undocumented to documented. So there's a story there to tell. Okay. What else? The concept of majority-minority cities, that's also something that interests me, is how to decide. And one of the things that in UNESCO one tries to avoid is to vote. That you have a decision by majority against minority. And that is perceived in UNESCO as a kind of something you should try to avoid, because you should try to find consensus with a lot of groups. And probably that's the key to safeguarding, because according to me, safeguarding intangible culture is all about trying to find consensus with groups. So that's probably also how we can deal with the majority-minority questions. Okay. There was a paradox indicated again by Dirk Gelthoff that should we pay more attention to diversity or less attention to diversity, and he came up with a kind of strategic essentialist question that for now, as we are in a transition zone, that we should actually try to deal with this and invest with this, and but that's dangerous, that the concept of super diversity can also start living a life of its own. So we should think twice when using that concept. The concept of super, it also caused a lot of discussion, and I wrote down, when I looked at the slide, there was the word co with a hyphen that appeared in a lot of the elements as either an alternative or as a solution. So co-creating, co-production, co-collection, connection, collection, contact zones, all with CO. And there was somewhere a quote that about coexistence of different ethnic groups, that is super diverse. So one might think about, is super the really interesting thing that we should use, or is it co with a hyphen? Especially when I saw those images, we should not continue to speak about us versus them. And if you read the points between, we should talk about US more than them. Well, in the United States, there's something called hyphenated identities, like African American and so on. So should we in the future all have that identity as co, hyphen, and then something else? So a lot of talk was about connectedness. For instance, in the story about the mass, and I think this is also a cohort that needs further reflection. Okay, I will go on. Something I personally also found interesting was the discussion about, in the talk by Nicole van Dijk from the Rotterdam Museum, is how do we distinguish, if we label, how do we distinguish objects and persons, and when telling stories. It's a whole debate that is going on in the field of actor network analysis and this could be interesting. Okay. Let me go further. Okay. One of the questions that was asked during lunch to me, and if you want to know what facilitators do during lunch, they present each other, and Jasper, he asked us the question, what is your superpower? And we used that same question in at least the group where I was facilitator from. And I answered then, my superpower is constructing Trojan horses, especially when trying to work with this 2003 convention. And I promised the people that I would explain later, and later is now. So I have two Trojan horses that I'm working on. The one is the concept of boundary, and this is a very fashionable topic in social sciences and anthropologies to talk about boundary objects, boundary spanners, which are mediators, boundary experiences. And I think this notion of boundary, not border, but boundary, where you can work with and where you have boundary objects crossing those boundaries, that it's an interesting concept to think about when also talking about museums and so on. Second one is CGIs. And one of the things I've been listening today, and what the word I heard over and over again was community. Local community, too much community. And that's something I am becoming allergic to, because in the UNESCO Convention, it's communities, groups, and in some cases, individuals. And you see a tendency in UNESCO, in the UNESCO Secretariat itself, to reduce that to communities, and especially local communities. I think it's a bad evolution, and that's why I propose to use this strange abbreviation, CGIs, communities, groups, and if applicable, individuals, if we start working with it. And it's an ethical principle when safeguarding ICH, the widest possible participation and active involvement of CGIs is the right thing to do. That's tweetable. If you use communities, groups, and individuals, then it doesn't fit into the format of the tweet. Then the second Trojan horse is FARO. The Council of FARO, Europe's Framework Convention on the Value of Cultural Heritage for Society. That's a very interesting definition of what is a heritage community. A heritage community consists of people who value specific aspects of cultural heritage, which they wish within the framework of public action to sustain and transmit to future generations. This is a definition that is embraced in a lot of countries. In the Flemish legislation since 2008, but also in the new Flemish Heritage Decree, we have used this definition of the FARO Convention of the Council of Europe, but the policymakers added two words. It's a heritage community consists of people and organizations. So, and these organizations could be archives, museums, etc. It makes a whole difference if you put museums and archives into that community concept. And there's one Italian scholar, a good friend of Valentina Zingari, who is not here, Lau Sagato. He's a Venetian professor in international law. And he indicates what happened in the country where I live, that we actually caused a kind of that we appropriated an international text, changed something, and that apparently we can get away with it. And he says it would be a very good idea to use that as communities, groups, and individuals are not defined in the UNESCO Convention, that we could actually use that definition, including persons and organizations, to interpret the convention. And it makes a whole difference if a museum is in or outside the community. And if you start work, and that's the Trojan horse which I want to propose, is that in some way of thinking that you can actually put the word museum into community, and then it changes the whole game as it is. Think about it if you want. Then I will find my last page. Okay, it's about the organization of this day. It was not an improvisation. It was an important implementation of the IMP project, and I think there are some people to that. And now I will use my third Trojan horse. I think it's Sophie Elpert. Where is she? So I will now do something which was not foreseen and give the floor to the Trojan horse who will take over from. Thank you for your attention.